Carlton King is a former Scotland Yard Special Branch and MI6 officer and the author of Black
For special branch in jihadi organisation.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy Podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy Podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening and don't forget to subscribe for free.
My name is Carlton King and welcome to the Black Spy Podcast, the show that shines a light on the world of secret intelligence, national security and armed governmental personal protection operations. But also, actually, in reality, we look into geopolitics, the micro and the macro, so the largest size and the narrowest size as we zoom it in to what we're talking about. And the reason why we do this is because what I try to do on the show with my guests, be that with my podcast wife, Fergus Isaac, and my third person in the stick, which is generally Dr. Rachel. But also, on occasions, I have guests on. There are regular guests and irregular ones. Now, obviously, one of my regular guests is the man about town, the guy who knows it all, the man who's hanging off the London buses and onto the, well, you don't do buses, do you? The man who sits into the cabs, the black cabs, and goes around London and has a feel for what's going on in the world. The one and only Dan the Man. How you doing, bud?
Hello, Carlton. How are you doing? I'm very well, thanks.
Great. Nice to have you back on today.
Thank you very much.
And as per normal, what I generally do when I have Dan the Man on, I ask him for his feels about town. And basically I ask, what is it that you want to talk about today? And it is an absolute surprise to me. And so today, it's back in his court. He's going to say to me what he wants to talk about. And then we're going to try and do what we can, or I'm going to try and do what I can and him too, with the subject that he's come up with. So Dan, where are we going?
Well, I thought let's just think about what's at the forefront of the news at the moment. And something that we can't get away from is obviously this whole Kate Middleton picture saga. Overhyped, to be honest with you. I don't know why everyone's going on about it so much, but I just wanted to really get your thoughts on this. Why do you think it's such a big story? Why do you think she, in inverted commas, is doing these edits to these photos?
Do you really believe she's editing these photos?
Well, this is the thing. This is what I want to get your opinion on.
Okay,
I mean, they've got a big team behind them, haven't they? So it's highly unlikely. But yeah, what's your opinion on this whole saga?
Look, first question, I think you said why. Now, of course, there is a vested interest in the United Kingdom to make sure that the royal family continues. Mm-hmm. Because that's the way our governmental system works, whether you like it or you don't like it. I am not a loyalist. Let me say that straight up front, and I'll tell you why, just my perspective, is that I believe that in a country, the top job, and head of state is the top job, for those who don't understand it, the king is the head of state. He runs everything of the state in terms of the icon. So if you are in the armed forces, you swear allegiance to the king. If you're in the police, you swear allegiance to the king. If you're in... whomever gives an oath for anything, so a judge example who gives an oath to say they will make sure that the country functions correctly and that law enforcement, that judgments are carried out, they swear in an oath to the king.
Yep.
So the reality is that I know people want to say, oh, it's no power. It is powerful because basically the bodies that actually run the state all swear an oath to the king, as do the government. Right? So the government then is underneath that, and the government runs the circumstance. Now,
So on that matter, just quickly, just jumping in there on that matter, because I mean, I'm not clued up on these subjects. Obviously, this is your field.
Yep.
I'm, like you say, just a man about town. The layperson, should I say. So if, for instance, there was a situation where there was differing opinions on something from, say, the king and then the government, are you telling me that the king would have a say to the army as to what to do over the government?
This is an interesting one. Officially, no, because what the king did and what the royal family has done over the years is, in order to stay in power, they have ceded some of those powers to the government of the day. So the Americans know this very well. We never do constitution in the United Kingdom. It's not that you're not a guy who has been enforced with knowledge. It's that the system doesn't give you the knowledge. So in reality, if you were an American example, I'm not saying America's great, better than anywhere else, whatever, you would understand how your system worked. So they are very well aware of what is the government, the executive, i.e. that runs it. They're very well aware of what is the legislature. They're very well aware of what is the judiciary. They have all that and they break that down and they're aware of it. We are not aware of it. So basically, the executive is the government of the country. So in our land, it means that you are generally an MP who's been chosen in from the party that's got into power, and then the leader of the party that's got them into power generally chooses who his executive is, so who his government is. Right? So that government. Now, of course, we know that him or she can then be changed without a vote, because it's happened like 6 times without a vote.
Rishi Sunak.
Exactly, Rishi Sunak being the latest example thereof. So without a vote, they can change. The party can change its leader and hence then get a new leader of the government, prime minister as we call him. So that prime minister is then new. Now this is the other factor, because we're coming up to an election, so I'm going to say all this sort of bits and I'm going to answer the other question you said. But, example, none of us in the United Kingdom vote for our head of government.
We vote for the party.
We vote for the party. Absolutely. In fact, in reality, what you're meant to be doing is for your local MP.
Yeah, local MP.
And how many local MPs you get is depending on which party, because first past the post, has the largest number of individuals. They then make it. So when people say, oh, I'm voting for Sunak. No, you're not voting for Sunak. Yeah, coming up for the election. You're not voting for Conservatives. You're voting for your party, for your MP. And your MP, if you want to vote for a Conservative no matter who's there, or a Labour person no matter who's there, you're actually not working to the system, because you should be voting for the MP. Now, that could be an independent person whom you think will do the best for your local area. That's what you should be voting for in reality. That's what the United Kingdom's representative democracy is meant to be about. But people have forgotten that. So what happens is they vote for a party. So you put a donkey in with a rosetta on, be that red or white, and they say, that donkey will speak for me, right? Don't matter who he is or she is, right? And in fact, I believe you could put an animal in and they still vote for it, right? Because it's the party. Now, that's what's wrong with our system. So number one, right in the beginning, it's actually being usurped. They're actually taking away the reality of our system, right? So when we vote. So I say that because you then get the head of government, the prime minister, and then you get the other secretaries of state underneath that prime minister. And underneath the secretaries of state, you then generally have, depending on how big the department is, you then have ministers of state, which sometimes they call junior ministers. And then you have your bog standard MPs, right, who are backbenchers and who are the legislature. They're the ones who vote for whatever they want to pass or don't want to pass, right? So it comes out of, if you will, the government. So the government say, this is what we think should be law. The reason why I'm saying this is because you just had recently this law talking about extremism. So you say, this is what we think should be law, right? This should be law. That's how we want it to be, right? And they put that then into Parliament, and the legislature general normal MPs, plus them, of course, because they're all MPs as a general rule, albeit you can be in government like the Foreign Secretary now and be in the House of Lords. And that's another aspect that needs to come on top of that in the second chamber. That second chamber, full of people crammed in there, put in by parties so they can have the vast number of parties, some of them hereditary. Basically, the great-great-great-great-grandfather fought with the king 400, 500 years ago, and the king said, here, that land's yours, mate, and you're now going to be a lord. And so the first son of those has ever been a lord ever since. And there's lesser of them, but they're still about. And these people go in, and they sign a book to say they've gone in on that day, and they get 300 odd quid, or if it's probably say 600 quid now. So every time they go in, you only have to stay 1 minute, and you walk back out, you got 600 quid every day. Job's a good one, right? So this is the second chamber, and that second chamber makes decisions based on what the primary chamber, the House of Commons, commoners, not lords, Commons has done. So based on the House of Commons, that secondary chamber then can try and twist the laws and change them. However, what has been now convention, this is Britain's full of convention, because it's not written down constitution. So what was as in convention is they say, oh, well, if the Commons have put forward a law, we shouldn't actually change it if the Commons vote for it again. So you can have the first reading, Commons, goes into the House of Lords to be second-guessed and looked at to make sure it's not just rubber-stamped. But the House of Lords say, no, we don't like that, we'll send it back to you. So they send it back to the House of Commons for it to be stamped, and the House of Commons say, we like the way it is. Right? So it goes back, for read for that, generally the governing party says that, goes back to the House of Lords, and then the Lords like, well, we shouldn't really change it because that's what the Commons wanted. Well, where's the second chamber?
Where's the second chamber? Yeah, what's the point?
What's the point?
Yeah.
Right? So this is how we get rubber-stamped laws, right, coming through. So I explain all of that because where does the king and queen sit, depending on who's there? They sit by signing every law off. Now, theoretically, they just sign them off. But, they could turn around and say, I ain't signing that. Now you've got a big constitutional problem. They'll stand absolutely right, because unless they put the John Hancock on there, as the American would say, that law ain't being passed, and it ain't a law. So theoretically, that can happen. Now, I understand going back in time, there's been circumstances, and I'm not talking now 50, 100 years ago. I'm talking, recent times, there have been circumstances whereby, under Lord Mountbatten example, where it's been made known, he was a cousin to the Queen, and the Queen's then got the ear, and it's been made known government were better not doing that. Right? Obviously, it's all quiet. That's why the Prime Minister never says what they've spoken to with the Queen and now the King. So, better off not doing that. Right? So, how often does that happen? How often does some jiggery-pokery go on? Right? This is what we've got to figure out. This is why, when we're talking about other people's democracies and say, oh, they aren't democratic, it's nonsense. They're no more less democratic than we are. Right? We've got our foibles, they've got their foibles. So this is where the system falls down. So yes, but if you put it to a vote, let's argue that, let's say we're going to go to war with Russia, because this is all the thing that people want to talk about these days. And the king said, I don't think that's a good idea. Military. How many military would go with government and how many would go with the king? I don't know. This is the things that can happen. Okay. That's the question you put to me.
That is the question I put to you. Yeah, that is the question I put to you. And I'm just curious as what would happen in that situation. Would it then be down to the individuals within the army, or would they get instructions from higher ups within the army? No, we listen to the king, we listen to the government. It's just a curious question.
But it's a question with real a status and venom behind it. Because theoretically, obviously, the government say we should go to war, etc., etc. But if the king turned around and said, no, I'm looking at this and it's going to be a nuclear war and everybody's going to die and I don't like it and you're a lunatic, what would the army say? Would the army then feel, what's the word I'm looking for? Would they feel supported to go against a stupid order from a prime minister because the king said it isn't right? See what I'm saying? Well, that's what you've got to look at. And I think in all of these systems, you've always got to figure somebody out. Something like that might well happen. You've always got to figure it out. You really do. I mean, if you look in the United States now, you've got a president who basically now ties shoelaces. right?
You're spot on there,
It's reality. He'll fall over. If you put
Yeah,
him tight to it, if the guy would fall over.
Yeah,
You don't know what, so people have said, oh, well, he came out of the State of the Union. I'm hearing that they're using on him some sort of drugs that are in exploration for anti-dementia.
Right, okay, so
Right?
we're just experimenting on him, essentially. And
Well, the guy wants to win, and so he was up for that. And if you looked at his eyes all popped up like that in the State of Union, You can't see me, but my eyes are popping out of my head, and he was apparently, don't believe me. And I always say this, don't believe me, look at it for yourself. So you can see he's not normal, because when he walks normal, his eyes are kind of half shut. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a Trump man, but the way Trump says Sleepy Joe.
yeah, Sleepy Joe. Yeah,
You've got to say it. The one thing Trump can do is hit superbly on a metaphor.
He's good at all that playground,
exactly.
that playground
metaphor
stuff.
for something. So I don't know if it's his or whatever, but Sleepy Joe fits perfectly. So, but this Joe was awake Joe. His eyes were all,
Yeah.
like he's on cocaine or something. And so, boom, that was him there for that short period of time. So if we had that and transferred that to the United Kingdom, and we had, let's say, Boris Johnson back doing crazy stuff like he's done before, and I call it crazy stuff, costing the life of 500,000 Ukrainians by telling the Ukrainians to fight a war against Russia, which they always knew they'd lose, right? But I guess he's not dying, so does he care less? He just gets paid out.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is, would a thinking, caring king, could he turn around and say, don't like that? And theoretically, he can.
Could, yeah.
Now, would that be the end of the royal family? So is it in his vested interest to do it? That's the point.
That's the thing.
That's the big point. And that's what, if you read Spare from the Sun, that's what the son of the king is what I'm talking about. That's what he basically said. Harry basically said, we're so frightened of the press, we don't do things that maybe we should be doing. We're so fearful because everything is designed to keep the firm running. You call it the firm. To keep the firm running.
Yeah.
Don't say keep the nation.
Yeah.
Keep the firm running, right? Because they know in most other countries, they've got rid of, and that was my hands going once, left, right, like a clapping motion. They've got rid of royal families in most other places. So that's the point. Actually, there is a showing for this. Spain, when they brought back their royals after the Republican era of Franco for a while, and Franco brought the royals back in a controlling fashion. When he died, the royals came over and democracy came to Spain. A multipleural democracy with, not first past the post, with, any type of people coming into power. When that came in and the Guardia Civil tried to do a coup, you won't remember this, it's like 1982, a Guardia officer came into Parliament, shot up in the air and said, we're changing it, because he wanted to go back to the Franco times. So, it was the king who was the person who was able to move, King of Spain, able to move the dial in the way towards what we would term democracy, and away from what the Guardia officer was trying to do to bring back sort of titles, fascist, Francoist type activity. So that's when a king becomes actually quite important. And one individual can do that, obviously with the backing of people behind him, because he's not doing it by himself. And maybe he thought to himself, if I'm out of a job here, if I don't sort this. So he's gone for it. Because self-interest is important in life. So that's what I'm saying. So the question is, the reason why I've gone into all of this is to say, please do not think this is piddling when people say a photograph's been doctored by at some stage, supposedly to be Queen.
Yeah.
That it's been doctored to say I'm all okay and I'm all right and the family are all happy and everybody's smiling and laughing. There is a purpose behind that. They're press people, and if you read again the Spare, so we're not getting it second, third hand, we're reading it from... The press people are at war with each other sometimes. So different parts of the family's press people are at war. So they've got big press offices that function on making sure the best story comes out for their particular principle. So in this case, the king and his wife-to-be, right, that they get a good story. And because the people were clamouring for something, they gave them something, and then they had to clean it up because of the mistakes. And I think she said, everybody plays around with a little bit of...
Yeah, she did.
You know,
she
I can't see her
she
making photographs.
No,
Can you?
and at the end of the day, what if that was the case and it was her doing that, and she did make these edits, okay, plenty of people do it, they make edits on photos or whatever, then why not, once you get caught out, why not just come out, make a statement, or take a picture of you, take a picture when it's not edited and release that. I don't get what the reason was for 5-day delay or whatever it was, and then put another photo up, which has also been confirmed that they're not true. Or I think there was another photo that's been looked at in the past where it is the Queen sat there with all of her family members, and it's come out that there's 16 edits or something in that as well. What's the reason for it? Like, surely you can get all your family in one room.
You have to show the ideal family. That's the big problem. The big problem we've gone down is idealism. Yeah. You've got to try and show that this family is the ideal family and there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
Right? You've got to try and put that picture forward.
It's all a facade at the end of the day.
Correct.
Is what you're
the
saying.
Facade. Here it is. Everybody's smiling. Everybody's happy. They're all friendly. The Queen's everybody's grandmother, the greatest person in the world, very friendly to everyone, blah, 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 blah. You've got to show all that because that's the road they've gone down. If they'd have gone down another road that said, you know, we have our problems like everybody else, sometimes the Queen's finicky, sometimes she's downright nasty, me uncle has been running around with people that, you know, are underage, but that is the way it is, you know, not underage in the United Kingdom, by the way. And this is a point that I will make. He has not done anything wrong to United Kingdom law. In terms of
yeah, you're right. You're right.
So not underage
it's
people in the United Kingdom,
I think
right?
People
so
are annoyed about.
He's gone down like that. Well, it's a seediness because they've tried to make him perfect.
Yeah.
Right? If he wasn't made, let's face it, even King Charles was caught. Would that be the right word? Taking a bag full of money from Bahrain, right? Now that was tried to be kept out of the press. Right? It was put on social media. This is the biggest problem they've got right now.
It's social media.
And
this is
because they can't control it.
Yeah, and this feeds into obviously what's going on in America as well, the whole TikTok stuff.
Correct.
And they're saying it's because of national security threats, because China and all this. It's
Rubbish.
because they can't control what's being put on there. Simple as that.
Can't control. And of course, they know the Chinese are controlling it. Now, the Chinese may or may not carry out intelligence actions based on TikTok. Right, the same way as the Americans carry out intelligence actions
Meta,
based on Facebook,
stuff.
Meta, etc., etc. We know they do because that's the game I was in. That's the game that you play. You have an intelligence agency to try and get everything you can out of intelligence. That's just the way it is. But I would suggest that it isn't controlling in any way, shape, or means what comes on TikTok.
Yeah.
Right, and so there's two aspects of the TikTok one. The first aspect is, you're right, there's this idea that, the Chinese will be controlling it and manipulating it behind the scenes. But the more important aspect is that it's a Chinese company that is massively outbeating American companies in that domain, which is of the utmost importance for the future. So that's the thing. Well, what they're trying to do, there's a thing called the Monroe Doctrine, which basically said, the Americas are ours. Do not touch the Americas. We will not allow anybody to do anything in the Americas. And if they do, 200 years it's been going, if they do, we have the right to take action against anybody coming in the Americas. South, North, Central America, Caribbean. We will take action. Monroe Doctrine. Add to that the Dulles ideology, but you could also call it a doctrine, where at the end of the Second World War, the United States used 60% of the world's energy, right? Other places were destroyed. Obviously, the Soviet Union totally destroyed. Britain, Europe relatively destroyed. Japan totally destroyed. Other parts of Asia destroyed. So the United States, 60% of the world energy. And because it had been able to hoover up technically for the war and make ships in a week, right? It had the industrial capacity as well, right? So what Dulles said, our job, and he was the fellow who was put in charge There's one was the Dulles brothers. One was head of the foreign service, so Secretary of State they call him in America. The other one was the head of the CIA, the new CIA that they created. So these are two absolutely powerful. So he said, our job is to keep that status quo. Mm-hmm. So to keep 60% of the world in the United States. In other words, to be the superpower.
Yeah, of course.
Right. So that's what they've been doing all the time. They cannot allow themselves not to be that superpower. Right? So the fact that TikTok comes along and the Chinese are soaking up everything else, to them is, whoa, we're not going to be number one dog soon. We better do everything we can to undermine China. Mm-hmm. And this is why we see actions about everyday China. And unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to say it, and people are going to dislike me, but listen, I've given loyal service to this country for the United Kingdom for 30-odd years. I've been involved in all of our actions, but we act like a poodle. So as soon as the United States says something, we follow suit.
Yeah, it's a joke.
It is a joke.
It's a joke. No backbone. It's ridiculous.
A foreign secretary once said to me, whom I got on with very, very well, I said to him, why is it that we're, and I use the word, acting like a poodle for the United States? And he said, Carlton, if you don't punch above your weight, you're nobody. So his assumption was, by acting like the poodle to the United States, that we were punching above our weight. Right? Now, that might have been true in the East-West conflict against communism and capitalism, but it isn't true when there is no longer that conflict and economy is what matters, and you step out of the body, which is the European Union, that gives you an insight to what the United States wants, which is influence throughout the whole of Europe. So when you step outside of the body that runs Europe, where's the influence within Europe? There isn't any. You've lost it, right? So now, still acting on behalf of the United States, we're not creating anything for ourselves. We're doing ourselves down.
Yeah.
Right? So, it was Douglas Hurd was his name, if people who know him. Dougie may well have been right. And I said to him, you may well be right, but it's doing nothing for the country, for the people, for your understanding. Yes, the United Kingdom once was the superpower. When you own a third of the world and a third of the world's population, you are a superpower. There is no doubt about that. When you're the biggest empire the world has ever seen, you are a superpower. But those days are gone. So now you have to learn to cut your cloth accordingly. And do you then involve yourself in a war that suits the United States in Ukraine, right? And put into it, I think up to now, people have said something of the figure, something like 15 billion. That's the figure. Let's bring it down to 12. Let's cut it even down to 6, right? 6 billion into it. 6 billion could do a hell of a lot for the United Kingdom.
Could get rid of homelessness. It could
a lot,
poverty,
hell of a lot.
Everything.
So why the hell are we putting that into fighting a war with Russia, which we know we cannot defeat in terms of the Ukraine cannot defeat? We've cost the lives of 500,000 Ukrainian soldiers, right? That's a fact. Look it up. I know, stupidly, and the BBC makes me laugh these days. The BBC put out the figure that Zelensky gave and said, 30,000. Are you laughing? Are you having a laugh? They lost 80,000 in Bakhmut alone, never mind anything else. So, turn around and say 30,000.
Well, they just push their own, they're pushing an agenda that they're being told to push at the end of the day, and reporting on stuff they're being told to report on. You're seeing it constantly with everything nowadays in the media. This stuff on Palestine is so one-sided. And what really angers me, it really does, is that you've got a couple of people right at the top making the decisions for the masses, when if you ask the general public what they want to do, they're going against the government majority of the time. It just seems like a couple of people are filling their pockets at the top or doing stuff that they want to do and enforcing it on everyone else.
Now, I've spoken too much. So what I want to do, actually, is I want for you to say how you see the public seeing what's going on, how you think the public is feeling. You've mentioned two subjects. We spoke about Ukraine, you've spoken about Palestine. What do you think the public thinks on those issues? Or have they basically drunk the Kool-Aid, as the Americans say? They've been given a cup of coffee and they're drinking it, believing everything.
I think it depends on what type of person it is. You see a lot of people that just believe everything that they see on any sort of mainstream media. And then if they see some small independent media site, then they're not believing it. Yet, when I've done my research, I'm coming to find out that those small independent media stations are the ones actually reporting the truth. And the mainstream media, or legacy media, are reporting on what they're told to report and essentially bending the facts. That's how I see it. And that's what I'm hearing anyway. In terms of when it comes to, let's talk about Palestine, Israel, I think that the majority of people are waking up to the absolute lies that are coming out. A lot of stuff that Israel have said, you can see that has been debunked. Yet, when those things are debunked, they're not being reported within these mainstream media. It's just sort of shoved under the rug. But I believe that the masses are waking up to the corruption, to the lies. And I don't think that, for the UK, from a UK perspective, I don't think standing beside Joe Biden and saying, oh, we think Israel has the right to defend itself, I don't think it's doing ourselves any favours at all.
When you say that, what do you mean? We're not doing ourselves any favours. You mean via the public? Do you think the public are saying this doesn't look right? Yeah. Therefore, if it quacks like a duck, it probably is a duck, and we should be then actually taking a more forceful position. Is that what you mean? Correct.
Yeah. And I just think that if what the government want is for people to truly have faith in them, then tell them the truth. Don't openly lie, and then when you're caught out in that lie, either A, don't report on it, or B, just have the balls to say, okay, we've reported on that and that's false. It just seems like every single thing that comes out at the minute from the government, there seems to be some sort of issue with it.
See, I'd take a little bit of exception with you there, Dan, because, and I'll tell you why, I'll tell you why I take exception. Because it's not just the government, is it? You've got the news media.
Yeah, it's the media as well.
Basically,
and then it poses the question, who really controls the world? Who really is the one who is in power? Are the people who are in power? Because at the end of the day, I don't know who to look to for who is the person making these decisions, and it seems like a lot of the time it's just down to who's got the most money. So and this is where all these massive corporations come in, and I'm sure they have a massive influence on all of these governments around the world.
Very true. So I put this to you then: if you feel that's the case, and if you, with your fingerprint on the feeling of the man and woman on the Clapham omnibus, in your case, in the black cab, if you, the man about and the woman about town, if that's what you think the case is this totally detrimental then to not only the news media, i.e. are people switching it off? I'm going to ask that a question. I'm going to ask you two questions. Are people of your era switching off the news media and saying, I can't believe in this? As Trump put it, fake news. Are people saying that? And secondly, are they then going the next step and saying, so that means government's fake, so I don't trust them either?
I think it's difficult to judge because a lot of the things that we see on our phones, on these social media sites, I think are things that are forced to us based on what we've searched for in the past.
Correct.
So when, for instance, I'm looking on social media and I'm saying, oh, I'm hearing that the masses are saying this, that may just be a subset of people that that's a subset of information that's being forced on me through my phone. Yeah. Whereas on your phone, because you've searched for different things in the past, you may get a totally different response. So it's very difficult to judge. But what I'm saying is, from my opinion, I think it has a detrimental impact on, the media in general, as you say. I think if you were to just look at the figures, say 10 years ago, who was watching BBC, to their ratings now, I would hazard a guess that their ratings or their numbers have dropped massively. I just, Yeah, I just...
Amongst your mates, let me ask that question. Amongst your mates, amongst your workmates, amongst your social mates, two factors. Yeah, 2 factors. I want to hit 2 factors.
Okay.
One, amongst your mates, social and work. Secondly, amongst your mates, social and work in terms of gender. And then thirdly, amongst your mates, social and work in terms of, let's say, ethnicity. And then in terms of sexuality. Would they all come to the same conclusion? Or do you think because of what they are, they see things differently?
Yeah, I think education is a big part in it.
Okay.
Where you go to school.
Okay.
Yeah, what I also think that, like you say, gender has a big role in it, and definitely race.
So what way do these differences... So let's take them precisely on one. So education, what way do you see it different?
Okay. So it's an argument here for both sides, really.
Okay. Put both there.
So I think that, say for instance, if you're one of these people who went to Eton,
well, you didn't
all these
school,
sort of things, it goes
okay.
to these, then you're going to have a differing opinion to the regular person who goes to just a standard state school.
Okay.
Because the information that you're being fed is completely different. Your role models are different. You're having speakers come into schools and you're seeing, oh, actually, I can be like this person. Mm-hmm. So I think that moulds your whole perception on, or your whole view on the world.
So in other words, what you're saying is, it would, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but would you be saying that you would consider that they would be thinking it might not be true what's being said, but it is in my interest what's being said?
On occasion, yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah. In terms of race, I think plays a massive part.
Okay.
Plays a massive part, especially with this whole stuff with Palestine now, and it's been called this religious war, when in reality, in my opinion, it's not. So, yeah, a lot of my, say, brown or black friends are on the side of the Palestinians.
Right.
Because I think there's that sort of feeling that the Israelis, who are predominantly white, or that's what we see them as, they don't see Palestinians as human, and that may be down to the colour of their skin. So I think that is having an impact on the way that they are viewing things.
Okay. Your white friends?
To be totally honest with you, I think again it comes down to age demographics there.
Right. Okay. And that
I think a lot of the younger people are in my position, and a lot of the more older people, because I think also as well it depends on what you've been brought up with, and if you're hearing Israel's always been the positive and Palestinians have always been the negative for your whole life, then maybe that's just ingrained to you. So that's ingrained in you. So that's where I'm seeing the difference between younger and older people.
Okay. So is that then that the older people would have a colonial mentality and therefore would think nothing of the fact that that Israel took over Palestine? Or would it be the fact that the older people remember the Second World War and say the Jewish people were badly done to, 6 million, so therefore deserved a place of their own? Or what would it be? Because, of course, we could all make those arguments. We could turn around and say, the greatest Holocaust ever, you could argue, was the 11 million Congolese who were, and nobody hardly ever knows about it. The 11 million Congolese killed by the Belgians. Mm-hmm. So we're in a period of 10 years. So 11 million of them, and then literally millions had their arms chopped off, etc., hands chopped off, and so on and so forth. So you could argue that was the biggest Holocaust, but they didn't get another land.
Yeah. You
could also argue that if you went back 100 years or so ago, maybe a bit longer now because time moves on, let's say you went back to give it a precise figure, to 1860, right? You could go from one end of the Americas to the other, from south in Argentina all the way north to 1840 all the way north, and black people would have been enslaved throughout, with the exception of Canada, right? Would have been enslaved throughout, nigh on, and had no liberty to move anywhere. Indeed, if you moved anywhere, you were committing an offence by trying to free yourself. And then you could have jumped to the other part of the world, in the Arab-speaking world and beyond. If you were a black person who was not of that stock, don't misunderstand that. A lot of people misunderstand it. You could be a black person in the Arab world and be the ruler, right? But if you're enslaved, you're enslaved. So you got to understand that. That's the way it is. So they could, and in other parts of Africa, you had that in colonial times. So what you're looking at is, as a black person, wherever you went into the world, your opportunities were limited, if not downright zero. Now, they weren't exterminated as a general rule. They were exterminated only when they wanted to take the land over. So, example, to make all these things concrete. I always like to make things concrete. So, as I said before about the Belgian Congo, Belgians want to take it over, so they exterminate people. The Herero people, the Germans exterminated them, 100,000, 200,000, who knows the figure. It's questioned. They're exterminated in South Africa. They're exterminated to some extent in what later became Rwanda, exterminated to some extent in what later became Kenya. So, where they were, they could be exterminated, right? So that, but generally not, because you wanted them to do the work. So you wanted them to do the work. So it's pointless exterminating people. You want to work. So you use them as chattel. So again, there was a problem with these people. So what I'm saying is, there's a problem with a lot of people who've had problems. So when the oldest people say, we feel an affinity because of people badly done to in the Second World War, is that then fair? That's my question. If that's the reason,
you're saying. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
If that's the reason, that's why I brought it on. If that's the reason, if that's not the reason, that's fair enough. But but is that fair? I mean, after all, what the Germans call Zigeuner, gypsies, were also exterminated by Germans. Yeah. And very few people ever speak about that because I guess gypsies are not well liked. So the Romani people don't get spoken about in terms of what should happen to the Romani people. You see what I mean?
Yeah. No,
so tell me, this is what I'm trying to find out from you. I'm trying to dig deep into this. Tell me where you see these differentiations between the age groups. Is it because of this feeling of, we fought in the Second World War, this is what we saw, it was outrageous, and we provide assistance? Or is it something else? Because, of course, in Rwanda...
It could well be that. It could well be. I think it may be that because it was a world war and it had a massive impact on people's lives. It actually impacted British people's lives. And obviously, that's what I'm talking about when I'm speaking to people on the street. I'm speaking to British people. So it impacted British people's lives. That, what you're talking about in Congo, it was in Africa, it didn't physically impact those individual people here in the UK.
Well, it didn't impact them when the people were being exterminated in Germany, did it? Other than the soldiers fighting there.
But then there was bombing.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It physically had an impact on their lives. Okay. So I think that may be a slight difference. But I really think it just comes down to education on what you're taught.
Okay.
I really believe that. It comes down to education on what you're taught. And when we're at school, or when anyone was at school, when you're talking about Israel and stuff, it's always they've got a right to exist.
Yeah.
And there was never any issue with... There was never any... When I was at school and I learnt about history, it was never said that, Israelis pushed out the Palestinians. It was never said.
Right. So it's like terra incognito. There was nobody there. And it's like the Australia one. So that's not what you get for Australia when I was a kid. There was nobody there in Australia and it was taken over. Yeah. So, okay. So if that's the perspective, that is the perspective of one set of people. Why do you think it's changing? That's my big question.
Okay. Social media, we're seeing it live streamed now.
Okay.
Openly on our phones. People, you open up your phone and you're seeing little babies, kids slaughtered.
Yeah.
And I think people are fed up with it because you're only seeing it on social media as well. You're not really seeing it on BBC. You're hearing the odd case here and there, but thousands and thousands of people are being killed. And every day people are seeing this on their phone. Yet when they go onto social media, when they go onto the news stations, it's not being reported on.
Right.
And there's some sort of silence there. And the story we're getting are Israel are defending themselves, and then we're hearing one story being told by Israel, and then a few days later it's all comes out as it's lies or it's false.
But damn the man. Now, are
Yep.
we being fair to Israel insofar as we say that, example, it's been 3 months of warfare, right? And in that 3 months of warfare, we're saying figures 30, 40, 50, 60,000, whatever the figures might be. Some people say 100,000 casualties, right? Whatever, depending on what casualties are, dead and then casualties, right? We're saying that the biggest loss of life, the fastest loss of life ever, and I spoke to President Clinton about this, and he said he was appalled and ashamed at what he did, and this is what I'm quoting his words, right, was in Rwanda, when in 100 days, 1 million people were exterminated.
Yep.
No big demonstrations, no big running around saying anything, no big people shouting out and screaming, nothing, practically.
But it wasn't being live streamed on people's phones, and that's the problem.
This is very true. And I was going to also put in place with that, also, and I think there's one movie, if not 2 movies about this. That's about it. I was also going to talk about the killing fields, as you can see in Kampuchea, in Cambodia, right, where Pol Pot has killed about 5 million people.
Yeah.
Again, one movie that I know of, right? So what you're saying is, because one, it wasn't being live streamed, and 2, it subsequently hasn't been shown on film, etc., that nobody's really bothered about them. So then, this is then my question. See, I have good friends, or had good friends in Shin Bet, which is the internal security service of Israel, and also in Mossad, whom I knew. It is interesting to note that the former head of Shin Bet is saying right now, as we sit, he's saying there are terrorists in the Israeli government.
Yeah.
That's what he said. He came out and said that openly. There are terrorists in the Israeli government. He said, I can name you those terrorists. One of them's the defence secretary. That's what he turned around and said.
Yeah.
Right?
I saw that.
So this is the head of the secret service, the security service of Israel. That service, by the way, that actually carries out the actions in the OTs, the occupied territories of Palestine.
Yeah.
Right. But what you need to understand is they have used to have quite a close working relationship with some of the Palestinian forces, right? Because they're all trying to keep a lid on the issue. So when you say the criticism, that criticism isn't a criticism that's not been made in Israel by some people.
I get that.
So I'm asking the question, why is the news media not showing that? Why is the regular news media, not saying this is what the head of Shin Bet is saying?
I would hazard the guess to say that, well, they've obviously been told not to say that. And it's all I can say is Joe Biden is good friends with Netanyahu and his family or whatever. And I'm sure that if he said, look, you're telling your media not to come out with anything, then that's what he'll do.
And you say that for the rest of the world as well? Because effectively it's the rest of the world saying exactly the same. Saying nothing.
I would hazard a guess that Israel have got their hands everywhere. They're paying people off left, right and centre. We can see it clear as day here with what's that woman, that Labour MP, that woman who had a stance completely against Israel and standing for the Palestinian people, and now all of a sudden, what's her name, Rayner, is it?
All right, okay, Angela Rayner.
Rayner. All of a sudden now, not saying a thing about it, and she's receiving money from the Israel lobby or whatever. They're paying people off blatantly.
Now, is that factual?
That is fact.
Okay.
As from what I've heard, from what I've read, that's
psychological operations. That's what you do. That would be the job of Mossad to do that. That would be their job. Quite rightly.
And again, like you say, so you're saying what that MP said to you. Look, we can't be stepping above our role or whatever. Stepping above our post.
No, we need to punch above our weight.
Right, okay. We need to punch above our weight. Yeah. But that's why you're being a puppy dog. He was the Foreign Secretary, not just an MP. That's why you're being a puppy dog to the US, okay, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
So I would hazard a guess to say that these smaller countries, like you're saying that, then they would, Israel or US, Joe Biden, who obviously the most powerful country on the state, would put pressure on them to say, look, you don't report that either.
Sure. So, actually, I think this is an opportune place for us to leave the debate now, because I know you want to come back on the debate next week with some other stuff which you've got going. I know you want to talk gender. I know you want to talk. Am I right in saying you want to talk medical?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, we can talk medical.
So because I know you've got some ideas on vaccination, etc., etc. Not in terms of vaccination, but more in relating to. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I will leave it at that for this week. Thank you very much for listening. Dan the Man's going to be back with me next week, and we're going to look at some other issues which we feel are absolutely important to this world. Potentially also, are we going to hit on nuclear war?
Yeah, we can do, yeah.
Potentially nuclear war and gender, etc., etc. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening this week.
Thank you all. Thank you very much for having me, Carlton.
And we'll see you again next week.
Take care.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe for free.
Here is a working class spy telling his stories, the secrets, the lives of spies. Feel free to message Carlton King on all socials and give this show 5 stars on Apple iTunes and subscribe so you never miss a single episode. For your ears only.
For a quarter of a century, I was a member of Her Majesty's Secret Intelligence Service.